You ever have one of those perfectly normal mornings that suddenly turn into a scene from a reality show you never signed up for? That was my Saturday. The sky was clear, coffee in hand. I was heading to my friend Ryan's place to help him move a few boxes. Nothing fancy, just a simple good deed kind of day. Ryan lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood that looked straight out of a real estate commercial. Neatly mowed lawns, white fences, and neighbors who waved politely but never really smiled. I parked my car along the curb on what looked like a normal, public street. I double-checked for any "no parking" or "residents only" signs. Nothing. So, I locked my car and started walking toward Ryan's house. That's when it happened. A sharp, angry voice sliced through the peaceful silence like a siren. "Excuse me, you can't park there. This is private property." I turned around, confused, and there she was, the HOA Karen. She was the human embodiment of an overcooked espresso. Short, loud, and jittery with power. She wore oversized sunglasses, clutched a clipboard like it was a sword, and had that look of absolute authority, the kind that only exists in her own mind. I blinked and said politely, "Sorry. I'm just visiting a friend down the street." Her lips tightened. "I don't care who you're visiting. This area is for HOA residents only. You're trespassing." I glanced around. There were no gates, no signs, no guards, nothing that said, "private." Just a normal open street. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "this is a public road." But she stepped closer, eyes narrowing behind her sunglasses. "Not when I'm on patrol," she said, as if she were the sheriff of the suburbs. And that's when I knew. This day was about to get interesting. I took a deep breath, trying to stay polite. "Ma'am, I'm really not trying to cause any trouble," I said. "I'm just helping a friend move. He lives a few houses down that way." Karen crossed her arms like a security guard at a rock concert. "I don't care what you're doing. We have rules here, and outsiders aren't allowed to park on our streets." I looked at her in disbelief. "Our streets," I repeated. "This is a public road. There aren't even any HOA signs here." That only seemed to make her angrier. "Oh, so now you're arguing with me?" she snapped. "I've lived here for 15 years. I know what's HOA property." I tried reasoning with her again, even pulling out my phone. "Look, if it helps, I can show you the map. See, this area isn't part of your HOA boundary. It's open access. Anyone can park here." She leaned in to glance at my phone, then recoiled like it burned her. "That's fake," she shouted. "You're lying. You people always think you can bend the rules." "You people," I echoed, shocked at her tone. That's when she completely lost it. Her face turned red, her voice shot up an octave, and she yelled, "I'm calling the cops right now." Before I could even reply, she had her phone out and started speaking in an overly dramatic voice. "Yes, hello. There's a suspicious man trespassing in our HOA community. He refuses to leave." I just stood there, half amused and half stunned. Suspicious, trespassing, all for parking on a public street. She hung up and glared at me like she'd just summoned backup in a war zone. "They're on their way," she said with a smirk. And that's when I realized this was going to turn into a full-blown neighborhood spectacle. Within minutes, Karen's shouting had attracted half the neighborhood. Curtains started twitching, doors creaked open, and suddenly, I was the center of an unwanted audience. A few neighbors peeked from their porches, others came out holding their coffee mugs like they were watching the morning's live entertainment. One older man across the street yelled, "What's going on, Karen? Everything okay?" Karen, puffing up with pride, declared loudly, "This stranger is trespassing in our HOA. I caught him parking where he doesn't belong." The way she said, "caught him," made it sound like I'd just been busted robbing a bank. I raised my hand slightly and said calmly, "I'm not trespassing. I'm visiting a friend on the next street over. This is a public road." But Karen wasn't having it. She stepped closer, pointing her finger at me, her voice shrill and dramatic. "You're lying. Don't play innocent. You people think you can just walk into our community whenever you want. Not today." Her performance was so over the top that even some neighbors looked embarrassed. One woman whispered to her husband, "That's not even our HOA street," but Karen ignored everyone. After about 10 tense minutes, the familiar flash of red and blue lights appeared at the corner. 2 police cars pulled up quietly, and 2 officers stepped out, calm, professional, but clearly ready for anything. Karen ran toward them before they even closed their doors. "Thank goodness you're here," she cried. "He's trespassing and refuses to leave. He's causing a disturbance in our community." The officers exchanged a quick glance, then turned toward me. I stayed where I was, arms crossed, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. One officer asked gently, "Sir, can we get your side of the story?" Finally, it was my turn to speak. I handed the officer my ID and explained everything clearly, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm just here to help my friend Ryan move a few boxes. I parked on this street because it's open access. There were no signs saying it's private or restricted." Then I nodded toward Karen, started yelling that I was trespassing and said she was calling the police. The officer nodded, jotting a few notes on his tablet. "Okay, sir, just hang tight for a minute." Meanwhile, Karen stood behind them with her arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently. "You'll see, he's lying. This is our neighborhood. He's not supposed to be here." The second officer calmly pulled up the city zoning map on his patrol tablet. It took less than a minute for him to look up and say, "Ma'am, this street is public property. It's not owned or maintained by your HOA. Anyone can park here." For a few seconds, it was pure silence, the kind that makes time stop. Karen blinked, her mouth slightly open. "What? No, that can't be right. I know our HOA covers this area." The officer pointed at the map. "Here's your HOA boundary line, ma'am. It ends 2 blocks away. This road doesn't fall under it." Her face turned from red to pale, then back to red again. But instead of apologizing, she snapped, "Well, he still shouldn't be here. He's making people uncomfortable." The officer sighed. "Ma'am, being uncomfortable isn't a crime. He's done nothing illegal." You could feel her frustration boiling. She muttered something about entitled outsiders, spun around, and stormed off, clutching her clipboard like it could restore her lost authority. The younger officer turned back to me and smirked. "Sorry about that. Happens more often than you'd think." I couldn't help but laugh. "Yeah, I believe it." Once the officers drove off, the tension finally melted away. The few neighbors who had gathered started drifting back to their houses, some shaking their heads, others whispering to each other. A couple even gave me sympathetic smiles. Clearly, Karen's reputation wasn't new around here. Just then, my friend Ryan finally came out of his house, balancing a box in his arms and looking completely lost. "Dude, what happened?" I heard yelling all the way from inside. I laughed, shaking my head. "Your neighborhood HOA Karen tried to evict me from a public street. She even called the cops." Ryan's eyes widened, then he burst out laughing so hard he almost dropped the box. "Oh man, that's Karen all right. She once reported the UPS guy because she thought his truck was too big for our community aesthetic. She practically lives to boss people around. We both laughed about it, but deep down, I felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. How could someone be so obsessed with control that they'd rather call the police than admit they're wrong? Later that evening, I decided to share the story online, not to mock her, but to spread awareness. I recorded a short video explaining what happened, showed the map proving it was a public street, and talked about how important it is to know your rights. The video went viral overnight. Thousands of people commented with their own HOA Karen stories. Delivery drivers, visitors, even homeowners dealing with the same kind of entitlement. The biggest takeaway: always stay calm, always know the facts, and never let someone with fake authority intimidate you. Because sometimes, the loudest voice in the neighborhood isn't the voice of truth. It's just the echo of someone who forgot what community really means.